Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're crazy busy these days.
Oh no, my pleasure, man. It's always good to talk to you.
Well, so we hadn't had a chance to really talk in a minute, and I think it might have been like the last time might have been actually when this series like first launched. Um,
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
right around that. So obviously a ton has happened in the time frame between, and now the final issue's out and everything. So we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. One, I just to get to one of like the bigger reveals that I was one of those things where I kind of looked at it and went, oh duh. Like why how has that not been something sooner? Because it's such a great idea. And that's twisting the having the dinosaurs, like having the Rangers actually become dinosaurs and creatures and having that whole twist. Like I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And
Oh,
it
thank
was
you.
so fun to play with and seeing, that juxtaposed with the, Dimension X Rangers and all that. When did the having them kind of turn into, those creatures, when did that kind of idea form for you?
Well, ironically enough, that actually was going to be in the first volume.
Oh,
Yeah, that instead of the Street Rangers, we were going to do the that they'd figured out a way when they lost their powers that they'd figured out a way to use the mutagen to turn them into dinosaurs or turtles or whatever the conversation was going to be at that point. But so in the outline it was that. And then when I started writing the book, I think right around the second or third issue, I realized I was just like, well, if we do this, it's gonna be like they're gonna be mutants for like 5 pages, just because of the way that the book was sort of breaking down. And I was like, and then I was like, how are the dinosaurs gonna pilot the dinosaur like the Zord? Like I just think there's like a thing where I was like, I don't know if that's gonna work. So I said, hey, let's pull it out and we'll do the Street Ranger thing. And if this does well, it'll give us something to utilize, hopefully, and spend more time on in the sequel. If we got a sequel. And so they were like, yeah, let's pull it and you can use it for later. And that's kind of where it started. So it was always sort of in the background of that. So when they called me to do a sequel, I was like, great, now we can do the Mutant Rangers. And yeah, and it was like, if the turtles got to be Rangers, the Rangers should be mutants. I mean, it just seems like an obvious fair trade. And there was like a 5 minute conversation about what they should be. Should they be turtles or not? And I was like, no, they literally yell out what kind of animal they are. They should be that thing.
yeah.
So it seemed like the obvious answer. I mean, from a design perspective too, what the coolest thing about that was, I think Dan got it in one. I think he sent one drawing over, and I was like, yep, that's it. Those are them. Yeah. It's
He's
always nice
amazing.
when yeah, he's really good. So it's really nice that, every once in a while there's something where you go back and forth. This one I was like, nope, we're good. Carry on.
Well, it makes so much sense too, because it gives them a point of, it was fun to see the turtles explore the powers and explore these things because they're not used to having them. And so it was nice to actually, because the Ninja Rangers was cool, but it's
Yeah.
also cool and you can do it. It made sense within the story and you don't have to expand upon it. This was like there's so much to explore here because I mean, even just having like Kimberly trying to learn how to fly,
Right.
have having Jason with the shorter arms and like all the things that populate there with them just trying to figure out how to maneuver just
Oh yeah. Zach
normally.
tried to figure out how to punch around two giant mastodon horns. Yeah. I was
Yes, yeah.
like, yeah, I mean,
It's
I my favorite part about it was when we pitched it. I was like, what's really cool is I like that Splinter got to come out and actually like train them a little bit and help them learn, and because he kind of it's most of the time as you knew from my Power Ranger run, like I love having the mentors get out there and actually work with
yeah.
the fight with them. So for me, I was like, and because of the way the story broke, I was like, I think there's an opportunity here to have literally Splinter. There was a line I remember really liking. It was like, years ago I helped four turtles learn how to learn their powers. Is I'm gonna get to do
Yeah.
it again, and the idea that Splinter got to be the mentor for the New Mutant Rangers. Like that was really fun for me. I really enjoyed writing that part, and that seemed that was like an extra added bonus.
Well, and he had it was fun in the first series to watch him interact with Zordon. And that was
Yeah.
like a really cool moment. But I appreciated that here he actually got a lot more shine and just like showcasing how his style is actually a little bit different and
Mm-hmm.
and the differences in like their teaching methods and things like that. And it was awesome to actually see him have to work with the Rangers just to learn, basic mechanics before we even get to, other things. And this issue had a lot of that. I also love, or sorry, the series had a lot of that. But I also love too that having Shredder, it's one of those things where like he's such a beloved villain. He's such an iconic villain. And so, I always feel like it can be a little dicey to have like, those like alliances
Right.
change. And this was so fun just having him be the kind of constant presence and interact with the turtles. And I love it's also distinguished that he's not really like, he's not a friend.
No.
He's an ally because their motives line up for right now.
Yes.
And I love that that's a distinct thing because it's not like he turns. And so I
No,
appreciate
he was
that.
pissed. Like
Yeah.
he's really literally just with the turtles because he's like Krang kicked me to the curb and we could have had everything, but because he did that, I want to show him what a fool he is. And so the whole run is just him being like, fine, I'm going to work with the people I hate the most in the world just because I got like, sent to the curb by my BFF. So like, yeah, I that was the fun part. That was like I agree with you. Whenever you have allies, and I'm a big fan of heroes and villains having to work together because you get to have all those fun conversations.
Right.
But I was like, I need to make sure that Shredder is still Shredder. Like I didn't want him to become warm and fuzzy, and he's not going to have an arc and suddenly become a better person. Like that was not happening. No.
Yeah. No, and it was great to see. And I also just love that the morph payoff isn't till later. So like it actually feels like a big deal, seeing him morph again. And same way with like the Dimension X, having those powers played with throughout it. I like how it was paced. Like it wasn't this kind of immediate payoff. Like you got some teases of things, but it wasn't really until like the fourth and fifth issues like a lot of those things came into play. Did any of that change really from like your initial idea? Was that all pretty much kind of what you had envisioned?
Well, yeah, I can be honest. So in the original outline for this one, there were no Dimension X Rangers. It was just
Wow.
yeah, it was just Casey was Ranger X. And we'd written the first issue, and I was in the middle of breaking the second issue, and I sort of looked at the outline and I was like, man, like we're going to make the audience wait 4 issues to have, because what was going to ultimately happen was the turtles were going to go to Dimension X. And then when they were there, the node being in working there with the Power Ranger, they would basically become the Turtle Rangers again. But I was like, that's not really a payoff. We've already seen them be Turtle Rangers. So like, why am I waiting 4 issues to show something that's already happened? And so what we did was I was like, okay, that's where the Shadow Morphers came in. And I was like, what we haven't seen is the Turtle Rangers and the Power Rangers fighting together. Like we haven't seen them both be able to share the power at the same time. So I was like, oh, okay, let's do that in the second issue. And then it was through a conversation with Daphne, my editor. She's like, well, if we have Ranger X, like he might be part of a team. And at that, because I was like, are they gonna, and then I was like, oh, Dimension X Rangers. And I was like, well, will they let me do that? Like, am I allowed to basically say that there were Rangers in Dimension X? And everybody was like, no one batted an eye. I never got any pushback from it. Nothing. I was like, oh, okay. Because sometimes there's those things where like you have the rules kind of set in your head where you're like, well, no, they're not gonna. But this one was one of those things where I was like, it was a very obvious answer that all kind of like lined up. And so when I realized that was the case, I was like, oh, we'll plant the morphers in the second issue with Krang talking about how he knows about the Rangers and all that stuff. And then we'll have when the turtles show up, they'll use those broken morphers, and then we'll have a whole new Dimension X Ranger. And then Dan got to design his own Rangers, which I thought was a fair thing for, Simone otherwise he wouldn't have got to do that. So that was kind of it all kind of laid out pretty well. And it was just because I was sort of feeling as a fan, I was like, I've seen this already. Like, how do you? Yeah. I was like, you got to elevate, right? You got to escalate the series. So it. Kind of came late in the game. It wasn't like a massive change. It was just one of those things where I was like, oh wait, if we move this forward, it opens up a window here, and then Dan did the designs of those Rangers, and I love that. I like that those guys we get to create mythology, add a little more mythology to the story, and then hopefully, and if we get if this did well and stuff, there's an opportunity to explore more of that stuff going into my MMPR TMNT 3 if we get lucky. So
yeah, no, and also that that brings us to I enjoyed that this brought closure to this story because it feels like a satisfying final battle, and you get story threads kind of wrapped up, but also it's very much leaves an open-ended thing on both fronts, like both for the turtles side of things and then both also for the Rangers, and then also for Shredder and the villains. Like there's actually a lot kind of teased and left open. So it didn't feel
Yeah.
like there was just like one cliffhanger. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good. That was the idea because I wanted there to be an emotional resolution to the story. Like you get a little bit of the main story in this one is obviously Casey. It's all centered on Casey sort of deciding to break bad a little bit and then learning as to why he would do that. And then at the end, what I kind of liked was this idea that like he did some like his decision was pretty bad. Like it really messed up the earth a little bit. And there was a moment where it could have all gone terribly bad. But he managed to help save the day and it all worked out. And so what I like the idea of like ending that resolution, you get the whole arc of Casey, but I like the idea that he's still got a little more to like the idea of going to Dimension X and maybe helping free those people from whatever's going on there. And Casey being able to use the Ranger coins to do that. I thought that was a nice little, like, that's an arc to me because it's now his whole arc at the very first page that his conversation with Karai, he talks about how he's tired of playing defense, right? Yeah. He's tired of waiting. Everybody else just waits and waits and waits and waits. And he finally, the whole arc of this story is that he finally gets his wish at the end. Is he's going to be offensive. He's going with April to go and see if he can make things better. So he changed and got what he wanted. And obviously there was a lot of conversations about, you know, should Zed be in arc 2? And we talked about it. And ultimately what I told them was like, I don't think he's going to fit. I think we already have Rita. We already have Krang playing a big part of this. Shredder's on with the Turtles. Like if I throw Zed in here, it's just he's going to get 5 lines and he's going to get 1 3-page action sequence. It's because it's just the nature of a giant crossover with so many characters. And I just thought, you know what, if we're going to do, if I want to bring Zed in it for the Turtle Ranger series, like I want him to be the sole bad guy, or I want him to have, I want a plan. I want a plot. I want a goal. I want to do all that stuff. And I want Shredder I want that combination. I want Shredder and Zed. So that was the other thing that got pulled out of this because there was it was in the middle of the outline. I think he was in there. He was the one who actually led the attack on Earth instead of Rita. But I was like, it just felt wrong. I was like, no, what's Rita doing? Rita's just hanging out again. Right. And so like, I did the math on this. I think it was like 47 speaking roles or something like that per issue. So, you know, it's just like, come on, let's just save a little bit for later. But yeah, that was the goal. What you said was like to try and hopefully it feels like the end of the story. It feels like you learned everything, but also in the same way that we did with the first arc, give you just a little bit of like where it could go and how it could go. Because like, you know, just that's the part of the Rangers and Turtles. Like the fight's never over.
Right. And also I think, you know, Rita has been like experiencing very much a renaissance. It feels like over the past year. I mean, just her obviously in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics, she's been as Mistress Vile, like that has given her a whole new lease on life, and she feels lethal. Here, Mora's work is phenomenal, and there are some just killer sequences, and she feels again like a real threat in this book. And then like once and always, right? Like she's like, I really feel like overall, like that character has gotten a lot of well-deserved, shine. And it's impressive that there's still so much to do with her after so much time and, so much story, because obviously she's had attention in the past. So I'm actually really glad that like Zed wasn't a part of this, because I feel like she really had a chance to shine. Also, Dan Moore's Krang is just
it's so much fun. Yeah, I know.
So that was weird.
Some of that came out of the first arc where it was like it felt like Shredder was sort of the impetus of the story. Like he was the one who had gotten the ability to break the Morphers. He was the one who was becoming Green Ranger Shredder, and she was kind of like, and they fight, and she kind of like pairs up with him, and so it's like almost like she's sort of in his wake in that first arc. And so I knew going into the second that I wanted her to be more of the driving force. I wanted her to be the idea of her taking over all of Krang's forces made it so that it would be her plan to turn Casey, her plan to create Ranger X, all that stuff. And then because I was like, I don't want her to, it's that balancing act whenever you're doing both franchises. You want to make sure that everybody, both franchise feel like they're getting appropriate attention, where it never feels like one group is sort of playing second fiddle to the other. And so that was where that came from, was the idea of like, I wanted her to feel like it was all her plan. Like Krang is involved and Krang has a larger idea, but the idea that like she was given the resources, she was given all the Shredder's resources, and what would she do with those? And I thought that was kind of a fun thing. So like, I love that I actually think she looks pretty smart in the whole story. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some people who disagree, but I like the idea that she was like, "Oh no, I know you were eventually going to turn on me, but there was that moment when she was like, I learned my lesson before. I've had green. I've given power coins to people before and had that turn against me. I'm not that dumb. I'm going to do this." And she was one step away from beating the whole thing, but she underestimated the power of friendship.
That's right. Yeah. By the way, I love that part. I thought that was like, yes,
cool.
Yes, because she would not redo the exact same.
No, she's not going to just here's my most powerful weapon with no backup plan or restraints at all.
Absolutely.
What could possibly go wrong? Yeah.
Two quick ones because I know. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat about all this. So as of like right now, the way the book leads, Casey and April are like the red and yellow of that team, or are they just kind of fill-ins until things?
Or
as much of that as you can tease. Yeah.
Yeah. I will Schrodinger's cat this a little bit. Yes and no at the same time. No. I as someone who I guess is this. My wife's laughing at me in the other room because I'm trying to figure a way to not to answer this, but answer again. I will say this. I will tease something. If I get to do it, April didn't get as much run in this and in 2 as I would have liked. If we get to do 3, I would love to correct that. Now, that being said, there's a lot of stuff in this idea that I have in the back of my head for the 3rd one that I allow myself to change that at any point, just in case. Because if I come up with something better, I don't want to be locked into this 3 years earlier or something like that. But I definitely like the idea of Casey and April going into Dimension X and being a part of whatever's going on there. However, if and when we ever see that, that might be in a completely different place. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Cool. And then one of the bigger talking points after the issue dropped was the looks of the turtles and their human form. And I got I got a lot of people talking. Just because number one, we'd never seen that to where like in this kind of way before. Right. I mean, they've always had disguises and other things, but here it was just like, oh, this is like what they would look like. I imagine Dan design all that as well. What kind of led to the creation of the look and everything, having them all be a certain ethnicity? Like what led to all that?
It really wasn't. It's really interesting because I've never actually been at the center of any sort of weird controversy at all. Like I've never actually had people accuse me of hating white people, which is always entertaining. Like it really wasn't a giant conversation. It was more it was written into the script and Dan did a design and I was like, that's awesome. And it went up the chain of command and everybody sort of signed off on it and it went into the book. And it was one of those things that like I didn't even, because to me, like just to say it, like they're turtles. They don't actually, in my opinion, don't really have an ethnicity. They're turtles. Right. Yeah. They weren't humans who became reptiles. They were reptiles who took on human attributes. So if anything, it's just like they could have been any ethnicity because it's just an energy shield so they can walk around amongst people. So for people who are upset about that, I'm like, I don't quite know how to answer that. Like, it's just what they chose. They're 4 teenagers who live in Brooklyn. I don't. Why not African American? Like, why would it have to be? It could have been anything. And so I don't know. But look, I understand everybody has their own headcanon. Everybody has their own thing. So, nothing is done in sort of a vacuum. Obviously, it went through, especially when you're doing crossovers with 2 giant franchises. You have, 2 different licensors, 2 different publishers, 2 different editors. You have a lot of people, and everybody sort of signed off on it. So I'm sorry for those people who are disappointed with the choice.
No. You don't have to apologize.
No, but I just mean like my intention I didn't do that. We didn't make that to make people mad. We did it because it felt right for the story and it felt right for the thing that we created. That's all. I agree with what you're saying.
They're awesome.
I think the backpack idea is brilliant. That was Dan's. The idea that I'm like, how do you the idea that he gave them all backpacks to like camouflage their like their turtle shell. I was like, that's so cool. And if you look up, they always have their fingers in sort of the Vulcan thing so that the 3 look like 4. Like, I love that. There was like such great little detail, and they look cool and contemporary, and I love them. I think they look fantastic. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer. I'm sure somebody's going to be upset, but
no, I was just curious because, like, especially, as you kind of touched on before, like in this day and age, it feels like everything honestly is like one step away from from pissing someone off or pissing off a group. 100%. But I just, it was such a honestly, you get so used to things in comics looking a certain way.
Yeah. And
so when it's not that, it's like, oh, at least some people look at it that way. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Because it's just not, it could have very easily been 4 white teenagers.
Easily.
And
totally.
It's just like, oh, and it was just awesome that it wasn't that.
Yeah.
At least for me, that's me speaking personally. But like, it was awesome that it wasn't that. So
I know one person was like, well, why didn't someone was like, I shouldn't read this stuff, but I do occasionally. Someone was like, why can't one of them be each? One one is like, I was like, they're not going to make the UN of turtles. They're brothers, guys. Like they are gonna they are gonna probably pick the same. They're all brothers. It made sense to make them one and not absolutely. Just like, so I don't know. Like,
no, absolutely. That's hilarious. Yeah. That's amazing. No. So it was such a great series. This crossover is so fun and just, I mean, look, I always say it when talking about this book, but the enthusiasm comes through. And
thank you.
It continues to do that. There's a great line from Raph when Casey's about to hit him, or at least you think Casey's about to hit him, and he's like, "Go ahead and do it, buddy."
Go ahead, bro.
I know it's not you, and it's just I don't know. That felt like Raph from the movie. Like that felt like straight up like. Oh, I mean,
to me, that's the most. But the line you pitched, that's the most important line in the whole book. Like when he says that, I know it's not you. Go ahead and hit me, bro. Yeah. It goes back to what they say at the beginning when he was like, when Casey is like, you think I could ever be brothers with someone like you? It's like Raph is telling him, I know you. I know the real you. This isn't the real you. You are my brother. Like, you're the guy. You are the 5th turtle, even if we don't say it. Right. And that's the thing that snaps him out of that. And I really liked that. I thought that was in the outline from the very beginning, was that argument at when Casey goes up against him the first time. And then the thing, because like I am obviously a child of the 90s. I love the original cartoon series, but I really, really like the 1989 movie. I think the movie, that to me, that is the voice of Raph that I hear in my head when I write those characters. And his relationship with Casey in that movie is so cool.
Yeah.
And his frustration with Leo, like they created that like Wolverine Cyclops sort of like, that sort of hit each other against, like, love each other, but always frustrated with each other's personalities. And I love that. And so like, I wanted to lean into that as much as possible. So yeah, I think that was I think the other thing that I love about this doing this crossover is like, I get to do like interesting little conversations that like, I got to actually have Casey ask like, why do you guys keep trying to take over Earth? Like, if the Utrons are so powerful, like, why Earth? Why this little planet? And I'm sure the IDW run has probably given an answer, but I liked the idea that like at this point they're just like, it's just pride. We just want to beat you down. Like, there's that great line in Endgame when Thanos says, I don't take pleasure in all the worlds I've conquered. I've never taken pleasure, but I'm going to enjoy burning this one down. Like, that's the moment you're like, you pissed him off. Like, it's just like, I love that moment. I wanted some version of that where it was just like Krang and Rita are just like, oh no, trust me, we could take over 1,000 worlds, but you guys are just annoying and we're not going to tolerate it. And then I also love the idea that I got to tell Shredder, and when the turtles hang out with him and they're like, why do you own the Technodrome, which is, if that costs probably $1 billion, what do you care about taking over the world? Like, right. What is it about this world that is so exciting? And this idea that I like, that he's just like, I want to be feared. I want that. It's all ego for him too. It's just about, I want a statue and I want people to say I was the most dangerous person in the world. That's what you do it for love. I do it for fear. And I just thought that was like, those are things that I always ask the questions. And to me, I think they are consistent with the characters that I remember. So like, that's the fun of these little books is like, I love the fights and I love all the morphin sequences and all the action figure stuff that we hopefully get to make. But I also really love to dig into little questions that I've always had in the back of my head that I've always thought there's an explanation there that could be really cool.
Yeah. No, for sure. It comes through, and it's so fun. I obviously have fingers crossed that we get to see the third one day. But until then, you're doing all kinds of crazy other things, so you're keeping plenty busy. I sincerely appreciate the time, as always.
Oh, of course, man. Always. Thank you.
No problem at all. And of course, you can check out all of our coverage on all the Power Rangers books and TMNT books and everything else. And plus, by the way, a big Massiverse book coming up soon. So, check that out. But you can check out all of that coverage right here on comicbook.com.